I never thought I'd be sitting here, in the hollow silence of my childhood bedroom, telling this story. But, looking back, with the brutal clarity that only hindsight affords, I can't say I'm surprised it ended this way. My name is Alara. I'm 33, and my marriage is over because, apparently, cheating is just a mistake, wasn't the magic, fix-all phrase I believed it to be. 5 years ago, I was the kind of bride you see in magazines. Radiant, impossibly happy, and utterly convinced I had found the one. Caleb was everything. He was tall, with broad shoulders that seemed capable of carrying the world, and hands that were calloused from building things from scratch. He had this quiet confidence, a gravity that pulled everyone in the room toward him when he spoke. We met when he was renovating my parents' kitchen. I brought him a glass of lemonade on a sweltering July afternoon, and the way he looked at me like I was a cool drink of water after a lifetime of thirst, I still get shivers thinking about it. He asked for my number that day, and our story unfolded like a time-lapse video of a flower blooming. It was scary fast. We moved in together after 3 months, he proposed 3 months after that, and we were married within a year. My older sister, Sloane, tried to be the voice of reason. "You're rushing, Alara. You barely know him," she'd say, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. I waved her off. Whatever. I knew everything I needed to know. Caleb had his own successful contracting business. He was ambitious, and he looked at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever had. That was enough. The first 2 years were bliss. We bought a little fixer-upper on a tree-lined street, a charming but neglected house that Caleb swore he would transform into our dream home. I can still picture him, a smudge of drywall dust on his cheek, excitedly sketching plans for crown molding and hardwood floors on the back of a dinner napkin. I was working a stable but boring office job, pushing paper all day, but it paid the bills. Caleb's business was growing, and our life felt perfect, polished, a promise of everything good to come. Then came year 3. The honeymoon phase, I suppose, wore off like cheap paint. The renovations Caleb had promised were now monuments to his neglect, half-finished projects scattered throughout our home. The most glaring symbol of this decay was our master bathroom. It had been gutted for 8 months. 8 months of showering in a construction zone, surrounded by exposed pipes and bare light bulbs, the beautiful Italian tile we'd picked out sitting in dusty boxes in the garage. Yet, somehow, Caleb always had time for other people's projects. He'd spend a whole weekend helping his buddy Dave install a new deck, or a week of evenings redoing his cousin's kitchen cabinets. Meanwhile, I was brushing my teeth over a plastic utility sink. I tried talking to him about it at first. "Hey, when do you think you'll have time to finish our bathroom?" "Soon, babe. I've just got a lot of paying jobs right now," he'd say, not looking up from his phone. Or, "This weekend, for sure." But the weekend would come, and he'd be too tired. Or he'd already promised someone else his help. After a while, I just stopped asking. The silence was less painful than the empty promises. He started working later and later. At first, I believed him. But then he'd come home smelling of beer, not sawdust, and I knew he'd been at the bar with his work friends instead of coming home to me. I'd try to look nice, cook his favorite dinner, but half the time the food would be cold by the time his truck pulled into the driveway. The loneliness was a physical ache, a hollow space in my chest that grew larger every day. I started spending more time on social media, a sad cliché. I'd scroll endlessly, a spectator to other people's seemingly perfect lives, while mine was falling apart amid drywall dust and broken promises. That's when Julian messaged me. Julian and I had dated back in high school. Nothing serious, but he was my first real boyfriend, the handsome, popular one who felt like a prize I'd somehow won. He'd seen my comment on a mutual friend's post and slid into my DMs. "Long time no see. How's life treating you?" I still remember the little flutter in my stomach when I saw his name. It was a ghost of a feeling from a simpler time. A foolish, dangerous little spark in the darkness of my empty house. We started chatting, just catching up at first. It was innocent. I told him I was married, of course. I wasn't trying to hide it. He said he was happy for me, that he just wanted to reconnect as friends. Julian worked at a popular local brewery, a place where everyone hung out, and he told me I should stop by sometime. The conversations became more frequent, then more personal. He'd ask about my day when Caleb didn't. He'd compliment my new profile picture seconds after I posted it. He remembered things I'd mentioned weeks ago, a book I was reading, a problem at work that Caleb would forget 5 minutes after I'd said them. It felt good. It felt too good to be noticed again, to be seen not as another half-finished project, but as a person. I started hiding my phone when Caleb walked into the room. Nothing had happened, not really, but I knew the way Julian and I were talking wasn't exactly innocent anymore. He'd send messages like, "Thinking about you today," or "You looked amazing in that dress in your story." I'd reply with heart emojis and miss your face, telling myself it wasn't crossing a line. One night, Caleb saw me smiling at my phone. "Who are you texting?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "Just Sloane," I lied. The name of my sister came out so easily it scared me a little, but not enough to stop. The thing is, I wasn't planning on anything happening with Julian. I truly wasn't. I just liked the attention. I liked feeling wanted again. Caleb was so wrapped up in his unfinished house, his work buddies, and the endless scroll of his own phone. I was just there, like the unfinished bathroom, something he'd get around to eventually. He had stopped seeing me. Julian saw me. That was the simple, devastating truth. I told myself it was harmless. Just words on a screen. But the words were building a bridge out of my lonely marriage, and I was walking across it without ever looking back. I convinced myself I deserved this little bit of happiness, this secret garden where I felt appreciated. I rationalized it by cataloging Caleb's every failure. He didn't finish the bathroom. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't notice my new haircut. Each failure was another brick in the wall I was building between us, and another justification for the texts I sent to Julian. Then Julian asked me to meet for coffee, just to catch up properly. As friends, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was different. This was real. This was a line I knew I shouldn't cross. I typed out a reply saying I was busy, that it probably wasn't a good idea. But my finger hovered over the send button. I thought of the silent dinners, the cold side of the bed, the exposed pipes in the bathroom. I deleted the message. "I'd love that," I typed instead. When and where? The lie had taken root. It was no longer just a thought or a text message. It was about to have a time and a place. It was about to become real. I showed up 10 minutes early for our coffee date, my heart racing like I was 16 again. I'd spent an hour picking out my outfit, settling on the pair of jeans Caleb used to say made my butt look good and a low-cut blouse I never wore around the house anymore. What was the point, when your husband doesn't even look up from his phone? When I walked into the cafe, Julian stood up. Actually stood up, like men do in old movies. It was such a small gesture, but it felt monumental. He hugged me, holding on for just a second too long, and I let him. We talked for 2 hours straight. 2 hours. When was the last time Caleb and I had talked for even 20 minutes without him checking work messages? Julian asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He laughed at my jokes. He made me feel witty and beautiful and interesting. That first coffee turned into a weekly thing. Every Thursday, I'd tell Caleb I was meeting friends from work for happy hour. Instead, I'd drive to a little pub across town where nobody knew us and meet Julian. A secret ritual. I started wearing matching lingerie on Thursdays. I told myself it was just for me, for my own confidence. It was such a lie. At home, things kept getting worse. Caleb and I had a massive fight about the bathroom renovation. I pointed to the $7,000 worth of fixtures sitting in our garage, collecting dust, while I was showering in what basically looked like a construction zone. "When are you going to finish what you started?" I screamed at him, and I wasn't just talking about the bathroom anymore. "I'm working my ass off to provide for us," he yelled back. "Do you have any idea how many hours I'm putting in?" Yeah, I knew. I knew exactly how many hours he was putting in at Dave's place, or watching the game with his brother, or whatever excuse he had that week for not being home, for not being with me. The fight ended with me storming out and him retreating into the silence of his garage. It only pushed me further into Julian's arms. Our anniversary was coming up 5 years. To my surprise, Caleb actually tried. He booked a weekend away at a cute bed and breakfast upstate. I should have been thrilled. But he'd booked it for the same weekend as trivia night at Julian's brewery. Julian had been talking about it for weeks, how his team needed one more person, how much fun we'd have. The thought of not seeing Julian that Thursday made my stomach physically hurt. I told Caleb I couldn't go. I have a mandatory work training that weekend, I said, looking at a spot on the wall just over his shoulder. He looked so disappointed. For a second, I almost felt bad. Then he just shrugged. Okay, I'll cancel it. No fight. No, let's find another weekend. Just giving up. That was Caleb, always giving up on us. Or so I told myself. The Thursday meetups with Julian grew more intense. He'd touch my hand when making a point. I'd let my knee rest against his under the table. We texted constantly good morning texts, good night texts, random thoughts throughout the day. I was living a second life through my phone. The Thursday after our canceled anniversary weekend was trivia night. We won second place, and I was buzzing from the victory and the 2 glasses of wine I'd had. Julian walked me to my car. The air was cool, the parking lot mostly empty. When we got to my car, he gently pushed a stray piece of hair behind my ear, just like he used to do in high school. I've wanted to do this since the moment I saw you walk into that coffee shop, he whispered. And then he was kissing me. I kissed him back. Hard. He tasted like the craft beer he'd been drinking, and his hands were in my hair, and for those few minutes, I felt alive again. Really, truly alive. When I finally pulled away, both of us breathless, I said the only thing I could think of to salvage a shred of my conscience. This is just physical, I said, my voice shaky. I'm married. He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Just physical. I can work with that. I drove home feeling a toxic cocktail of guilt and excitement. I felt validated, like I'd been dying of thirst and finally got a sip of water. It was just a kiss, I told myself over and over. Not really cheating. Not really a betrayal. Just a kiss. Another lie in a rapidly growing collection. Just a kiss escalated with terrifying speed. We went from innocent coffee meetups to full-on hotel room rendezvous within 3 weeks. I became an expert at deceit, an architect of an alternate life that Caleb knew nothing about. I told Caleb I'd joined a women's networking group that met twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. In reality, those were my nights with Julian. The lie was elaborate and detailed. I had names for the other members, anecdotes from our meetings. I kept a change of clothes and a gym bag in my trunk, so I could go straight from work to see him. I had a whole separate makeup bag with toiletries, and a specific perfume I only wore with him, a desperate attempt to cover up any evidence. I created a fake contact in my phone. Julian became Priya from HR. I had every detail planned, every contingency considered. The lies were exhausting, but they were also a thrill. With Julian, the sex was different than it had ever been with Caleb. It was urgent, exciting, forbidden. It felt like we were stealing something precious, and in a way, I guess we were. I convinced myself I needed it. I convinced myself Caleb deserved it. If he was a better husband, more attentive, more present, I wouldn't need Julian at all. That's what I told myself. Anyway, I started taking more and more risks. Once, during our anniversary dinner, the one Caleb rescheduled, I was texting Julian under the table while Caleb was talking about our future, about finally finishing the house. Caleb had taken me to a fancy restaurant. He was really trying to make an effort, and there I was, half listening while sexting another man. The worst part? I wasn't even that bothered by it. I felt detached, like I was watching a movie of my own life. But the lowest moment, the one that still makes my stomach clench with a cold, hard shame, happened when Caleb's dad had a heart attack. Caleb called me 7 times while I was in Julian's bed. My phone was on silent. When I finally checked it and saw the string of missed calls, I knew something was terribly wrong. I called Caleb back, and he was sobbing, incoherent, saying he needed me, that his dad was in the ICU. I'll be right there, I promised. But I wasn't. First, I took the time to shower at Julian's place. I meticulously washed my hair, scrubbed my skin, erasing every trace of him. I didn't want to smell like another man while comforting my husband in his darkest hour. Even now, I can't believe how cold I was, how calculating. My first thought wasn't for my husband or his father, but for covering my tracks. Money started becoming an issue. I was taking cash from our joint account for hotels, for little gifts for Julian, for the gas driving across town to see him. Caleb started asking questions about our finances, about where the money was going. I'd make up expenses, a car repair, a splurge on new work clothes. The lying got easier with practice. I'd look Caleb straight in the eyes and tell him I loved him, then text Julian the moment he left the room. The worst thing I did was take $800 from our savings for a weekend trip with Julian to a cabin upstate. I told Caleb it was for a mandatory work retreat that I had to pay for upfront and get reimbursed for later. He didn't even question it. We spent the whole weekend in bed, barely leaving the cabin except to get more wine. It was like we were the only two people in the world. I didn't think about Caleb once. But when I got home, I noticed a change in him. He was quieter, more observant. He'd ask casual questions about my networking group, about Priya from HR. He started checking receipts, asking to see our credit card statements. Once, I caught him looking at my phone while I was in the shower. I should have been more careful, but part of me was getting sloppy on purpose. The lying was a constant, heavy weight, and some sick part of me almost wanted to get caught, just to have it all out in the open. I started keeping a second phone, a cheap prepaid one Julian had bought me. It was our direct line, where we could text freely without me worrying about deleting messages. I kept it hidden in my tampon box, the one place I knew Caleb would never look. There were so many close calls. Once, he almost found the phone when it was charging in my car. Another time, he picked up my regular phone right as a notification from Priya came through saying how amazing last night was. I managed to snatch it from him, claiming it was urgent work stuff, but I could see the suspicion hardening in his eyes. He was connecting the dots, and I, in my arrogance, was too busy drawing new ones to notice. Everything came to a head last Friday. I had just gotten home from work, planning to change quickly before meeting Julian, when Caleb said we needed to talk. His voice had a finality to it that made my stomach drop. "I found something," he said, his eyes like chips of ice. "And we need to discuss it tonight. No networking group, no last-minute work emergencies. Be home." The threat was clear. I canceled on Julian, my hands shaking as I typed the text. I walked into the kitchen at 6 o'clock to find Caleb sitting at our table. He was calm in a way that terrified me more than any yelling could. There was no hello, no kiss, just this eerie composure that made the hair on my arms stand up. In front of him on the table was a manila folder. Neat, organized. That was Caleb. All the evidence compiled and ready. "Sit down, Alara," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I tried to act normal. "What's going on? You're scaring me." He just pushed the folder toward me. "Open it." With trembling hands, I flipped it open, and I felt my world collapse. Screenshots, dozens of them. Texts between Julian and me, the explicit ones. The ones where I complained about Caleb. The ones where we planned our secret meetings. My phone's location history. A damning map showing regular visits to Julian's apartment complex and the hotels across town. Receipts. A statement from our joint bank account with every cash withdrawal I'd made highlighted in yellow, the dates aligning perfectly with my networking group nights. He had everything. Caleb. I can explain I started, but the words died in my throat when he reached into his pocket and placed my second phone on the table. My secret phone. The one from my tampon box. My breath left my body in a ragged gasp. He had found everything. "How long have you known?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. 6 weeks, he said. "I've known for 6 weeks, Alara. I wanted to be sure. To have all the facts before I confronted you. 6 weeks. For 6 weeks he had been watching me, listening to my lies, seeing my betrayals. For 6 weeks he had been gathering evidence while I thought I was getting away with it. The humiliation was a physical wave so overwhelming I felt like I was drowning. It didn't mean anything, I tried, the words sounding pathetic even to my own ears. It was just physical. We were going through a rough patch, and you were never home, and... Stop. Just one word, but it cut through my excuses like a knife. "I'm not interested in your justifications." That's when it hit me. The reality of what I had done and what was about to happen. The tears came fast and hard. Gulping, choking sobs that made it hard to breathe. I fell to my knees next to his chair, a desperate theatrical gesture. "Caleb, please, you can't do this. Everyone makes mistakes." Cheating is just a mistake. People recover from this all the time. I was crying so hard I started gagging, mascara running down my face in black rivers. He looked down at me with an expression of pure disgust. A mistake, Alara, is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. A mistake is accidentally shrinking my favorite shirt in the dryer. What you did was a series of deliberate choices, every single day, for months. I'll do anything, I sobbed, clutching at his arm. Anything to fix this. I'll cut off all contact with him. I'll go to therapy. I'll be a better wife. Please, Caleb. Please don't throw away 5 years over one mistake. One mistake? His voice finally cracked, not with sadness, but with pure incredulity. You've been sleeping with another man for 3 months. You stole from our joint accounts to pay for it. You lied to my face every single day. You were with him, he paused, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. You were with him when my father was in the hospital. I didn't know he knew that last part. It knocked the wind out of me. He stood up and walked toward our bedroom. I followed him, still pleading, promises pouring out between sobs. He started packing a bag, methodically placing folded clothes inside like this was just another business trip. Where are you going? I demanded, panic rising in my throat. I've already spoken to a lawyer. A lawyer. The word hit me like a slap. This wasn't just a fight. He was leaving. Really leaving. Something in me snapped. I lurched forward, grabbing his face, trying to kiss him. Baby, please, look at me. Remember how good we are together. I pulled at my shirt, buttons popping off, desperate to reach him physically since my words weren't working. We can get past this. Let me show you how sorry I am. Caleb recoiled, pushing my hands away. Don't. Have some dignity, Alara. Dignity. Dignity went out the window the moment I realized I was about to lose everything. I followed him from room to room, alternating between blaming him. You were emotionally unavailable. You never finished the renovations. And pathetic begging. I threatened to hurt myself if he left. I reminded him of our vows, for better or for worse, conveniently ignoring the forsaking all others part I'd trampled all over. When he finally had his bag packed and moved toward the front door, I completely lost it. I threw myself against the door, physically blocking his exit. You can't leave, I sobbed. I won't let you. Move, Elara. His voice was firm but tired. So tired. No, we need to talk this through. You can't just leave. When he tried to reach around me for the doorknob, I dropped to the floor, wrapping myself around his legs like a toddler having a tantrum. Please, don't go. Please don't go, I kept repeating, holding on so tight my arms ached. Caleb just stood there, looking down at me with an expression I will never forget. It was a mixture of pity, disgust, and complete exhaustion. Then, he took out his phone and called his brother. 20 minutes later, his brother Jake was at our door. I was still on the floor, still crying, my voice gone hoarse. Jake took one look at the scene, me clinging to Caleb's legs, Caleb standing there with his packed bag, and understood everything. The marriage was over. The weeks after Caleb left were the most desperate of my life. I became someone I didn't recognize, a stalker in the making. I'd drive by his brother's house, hoping for a glimpse of his truck. I sent dozens of texts a day that went unanswered. I called until he blocked my number. When he blocked me on social media, I created fake accounts just to see his page. I showed up at one of his work sites, causing such a scene that he lost the client. I still remember the foreman asking him, "Is this your crazy wife?" And Caleb responding, "Soon-to-be ex-wife," without even looking at me. I was escorted off the property while screaming about our love story, how we were meant to be together, how everybody deserves a second chance. When the divorce papers arrived, I thought I was prepared. I wasn't. Seeing it all laid out in clinical, legal terms, the division of assets, the timeline for proceedings made it real in a way nothing else had. Caleb wasn't coming back. This wasn't a rough patch. This was the end. In my most desperate move, I drained our joint account of the remaining $7,200. I used it to buy him an expensive watch he'd once admired, a weekend trip package to the place we'd spent our first anniversary, and dozens of other gifts I thought might remind him of the good times. He returned every single one, unopened. The fallout was swift and brutal. I had to sell my car to repay Caleb for the money I'd taken. I lost my job after repeatedly calling in sick to drive past Caleb's workplace or sit outside his house. I was forced to move back in with my disapproving parents. At 33, I was sleeping in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded posters and remnants of a simpler, more innocent time. It's been a year now since Caleb left. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Last month, I ran into him at my cousin Amber's wedding. He was with his new girlfriend, Tessa. She was beautiful, of course. I'd had too much champagne, and when I saw them slow dancing, something inside me snapped. I walked right up to them and made a nasty comment about her dress. My uncle had to escort me outside before I completely ruined Amber's day. Last week, I saw it on Facebook. Caleb's relationship status changed to engaged. The comment section was flooded with congratulations, people saying they'd never seen him so happy, how perfect he and Tessa were together. Out of some morbid curiosity, I drove past our old house. His house, now. The renovations were complete. The patchy lawn was now a lush green carpet. The front porch, which had been rotting for years, was rebuilt and freshly painted. The bathroom I'd showered in with exposed pipes for 8 months was probably beautiful now, with that expensive Italian tile finally installed. He'd finished everything after I left. Or rather, after he'd made me leave. For a brief, blindingly clear moment, I saw the truth. Caleb hadn't been the problem. I had. But even this realization was fleeting, like a flash of lightning in a storm. By the time I got home, I had already reconstructed my narrative. If Caleb had been more attentive, I wouldn't have been so vulnerable to Julian's advances. If he'd really loved me, he would have forgiven one mistake. The truth is, I don't think I'm capable of the kind of honest self-reflection that might actually help me grow from this. It's easier to blame circumstances, blame Caleb, blame anyone but myself. Last night, I created a new dating profile. As I filled out the "What I'm looking for" section, I paused. Then, I wrote, "Looking for someone who understands that relationships are complicated and mistakes happen." Because that's the lesson I've taken from all of this. Not that I should be more honest or more faithful or more accountable, but that I should find someone who will forgive me when I inevitably mess up again. Someone who won't have such rigid, unrealistic expectations of fidelity. Someone who knows that cheating is just a mistake. The real mistake, I've decided, wasn't the cheating. It was choosing a man who couldn't forgive like a real husband should.